Better inside or out? After a stint at the Dutch embassy in Caracas, Venezuela's opposition candidate for president, Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, preferring exile in Spain to arrest by his election rival, incumbent Nicolas Maduro. This is a rally taking place in Madrid. Did the 76-year-old former diplomat do the right thing going to Spain? How about the leader of the opposition coalition, Corina Machado, the conservative who was barred from running? She insists that she's staying put in Venezuela, all the while playing a bit of hide and seek with authorities who are also threatening her with jail time. As for the successor of Hugo Chavez, he claims he won the July 28th first round of the presidential election with 56%, but still hasn't released any precinct-by-precinct figures to prove it. In the past, Nicolas Maduro could count on stalwarts of the Latin American left to back him. Will it be different this time? Already Chile's left-wing president denounced the result, while neighbors Brazil and Colombia, who have been offering to mediate this latest crisis, are weighing their options. More broadly, how does oil-rich Venezuela do it? It seems to lurch from crisis to crisis with never any change at the top in a quarter century. What are the options for the opposition? What are the options for the country's 28 million citizens? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Venezuela's showdown. Joining us from Caracas, France 24 correspondent Noris Argotes Soto. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks to you guys for the invitation.
His latest novel in French is a page-turning crime story that turns to international intrigue. It's set in Hugo Chavez-era Caracas. Vicente Olive, also the author of I Killed Simon Boulevard. This one is called
Les Poissons de Caracas.
The Fish of Caracas.
Exactly.
And yeah, it sounds like a bit like The Godfather for a reason. Also with us, filmmaker Margarita Cadenas, producer of the documentary Women of the Venezuelan Chaos. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
From Modena, Italy, Italian-Venezuelan journalist Stefano Soler Tamburini, in a previous life a Caracas correspondent, today editor of the daily newspaper Avvenire. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
If you're on the go, you can always listen, like, and subscribe to the France 24 debate, wherever podcasts are streamed. The election was July 28th. The fallout still being felt, both inside Venezuela and abroad, what with that rally taking place this Tuesday outside the Spanish parliament, a rally called by the opposition. Nicholas Rushworth has more on the context under which Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia made his way over the weekend to Spain.
The Venezuelan opposition presidential candidate Edmundo Gonzalez arrived in Spain seeking asylum amid a political and diplomatic crisis over Venezuela's disputed July election. Supporters gathered at the military base in Madrid where his plane landed and expressed relief that he was safe.
Whoever is in danger under Nicolas Maduro's regime should be safer here and can maintain their strategy from here.
They forced him to flee. This only confirms that Venezuela is a dictatorship that's impossible to live in. If you don't agree with the regime, you have to leave or you might get killed.
Gonzalez arrived after Caracas granted safe passage. His surprise departure came just days after Maduro's government ordered his arrest.
The governments of Spain and Venezuela agreed on providing a safe conduct to citizen Edmundo Gonzalez, so he could abandon national territory and he could receive the asylum granted by Spain.
The Spanish foreign minister says there were no talks on Gonzalez's exile.
There has not been any kind of political negotiation between the government of Spain and the government of Venezuela. The political asylum has been at the personal request of Edmundo Gonzalez.
Venezuela's opposition says July's election resulted in a resounding win for Gonzalez, and published vote tallies online to show that. Nicolas Maduro, now into his third term as president, has dismissed that and says there was a right-wing plot to sabotage his government. The US, EU and various foreign governments say they won't accept his win until he releases proof that he got most votes.
Norris Algate Soto, before we talk about that rally taking place in Madrid this Tuesday, the thoughts, we saw a few reactions in the crowd there, but the thoughts where you are about Edmundo Gonzalez going to Spain.
Well, the situation in Venezuela remains tense. I'm going to speak about what's the public sentiment here in Venezuela. It's very divided. Half of the population believe that Edmundo shouldn't have left Venezuela, that he should continue to fight here. And they see them as an abandonment from their leader, from the opposition. And there's other half of the people who believe that he was in danger here in the country, so he had to leave to safeguard his freedom, his personal freedom and everything. So the feeling is very mixed up. It's very confusing. The opposition hasn't been clear towards what steps are they going to take moving forward, and that's causing some frustration, despair in the population, and that's the current situation here in Caracas.
Vicente Olive, your thoughts listening to what Norris just said.
Yes.
There are divisions over whether or not he should have left.
Absolutely, because Venezuela is a country that is haunted by the past leaders that left the country, like Juan Guaido, who left to the United States, Leopoldo Lopez, and Manuel Rosales. So here we fear that we're reliving that. But we can't forget that Edmundo Gonzalez was a placeholder, a candidate that nobody knew about until a year ago, and that the real person behind the opposition is Corina Machado. She's still there. She said hasta el final, and even though that contradicts a little bit what Edmundo Gonzalez did, it still seems to be the right strategy to adopt.
Yeah, let's listen to her now. Back in 2019, Venezuela's opposition got much of the international community to recognize the then National Assembly Speaker Juan Guaido as president. But Nicolas Maduro never budged and eventually wore down the resolve of both the opposition and the international community. The current opposition leader, and like Vicente was saying, Edmundo Gonzalez, a placeholder, she's asking world leaders to extend the same courtesy and recognize Gonzalez as head of state.
To the international community, we have asked and we ratify today more than ever that the recognition of Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia as president-elect should proceed. We have had multiple contacts with the presidents, prime ministers, foreign ministers in this regard, and the fact that Edmundo has been, as he himself said, coerced, pressured, blackmailed, only increases the urgency to proceed with this recognition. Secondly, to denounce and evidence the magnitude of the repression to which we are all subject and the cost of repression in Venezuela.
A lot to unpack in that, but first of all, should Edmundo Gonzalez have stayed or gone?
No, I think he didn't have any option. He has to leave because he has threats of death, and then he didn't have any possibility to really be free. He's not like Corina Machado, that is younger and has the energy to squeeze and go and appear suddenly in a manifestation. And I think that he could be very useful outside the country. He can be now here in Europe. He can go to the States. He can make some alliance with people, and then he is the president that has been elected. We can compare, like, for instance, Rómulo Betancourt, that he was in Venezuela, he was exiled, and then he arrived when the democracy started in Venezuela. And we have here in France, it's another example, but sort of figure that is the goal. he was useful outside France, not in France during the occupation. And I think that really Edmundo Gonzalez, he can integrate.
But we saw what happened with Juan Guaido.
Yes, but
After a while,
different.
it just didn't.
But it's completely.
How is it completely different?
It's completely different. Why? First of all, we have Maria Corina Machado. Edmundo Gonzalez, he appears because Maria Corina Machado, she was out because the government, he didn't give the opportunity to be candidate. She wanted, then there was another woman, and then Edmundo Gonzalez was the only person that could represent the opposition. And Maria Corina Machado is there. As she said, she stayed in Venezuela, and Edmundo Gonzalez in foreign countries would be represented.
All right, so a double act, domestic and foreign. Stefano Soler Tamburini, do you agree?
Yes, I am here. I think that exile is an essential part of Venezuelan political history. And so because we are facing a one-side violence towards regime would apply a kind of piece of symmetries.
But can you have legitimacy if you're abroad?
Sorry?
Can you have legitimacy if you're abroad, if you're in exile?
Yes. And I think that the situation between Edmundo and Guaido is very different, and I agree with my colleague because Edmundo was won a political election recognized from both parts, from regime and the opposition. The problem is that the elections in Venezuela are not enough to realize a peaceful transition. And at this moment, the time is first enemy, in my opinion, for Venezuelan opposition, because the immigration crisis tends to increase from political elections and from increasing of political persecution from Maduro. At least 4 million Venezuelans wish to leave from country, and Venezuelan people tomorrow wish to remain a diaspora, and a people distributed in different countries in this situation. And finally, I think that the permanence of Maduro's power is perfectly correlated with this problem, with Venezuelan crisis. The problem, according to different analysis,
Stefano, I'm going to interrupt you because we're having issues with the audio fading in and out. Apologies for that. We'll try to maybe disconnect and call you back and try to fix that in a hurry. Apologies for that. Vicente Oliva, if I understand correctly, what Stefano was saying there is this feeling that the core size of the diaspora now is so large that actually what happens abroad does matter, but does it really?
Yes, well, the situation is not the same as in 2017 and before. It has radically changed. And just to get some facts on the ground, we have to say that Nicolas Maduro, the 28th of July, executed the biggest fraud in the history of Latin American history. And not only that, but he lost by such a huge margin that he's forced to repress the civilians and the population. So it's not like in 2017 where he still had some political capital. Now the fight is not between the government and the opposition. It's between Nicolas Maduro and all of the Venezuelans that don't want him there and want him to leave. So it's not the same situation with Guaido, and we're hoping that we can have that political capital in our favor.
that political capital in your favor, but again, it's the question of what the international community does. That rally taking place in Madrid as we speak, but it's a rally called by the opposition. There seems to be some domestic politics involved. The opposition conservatives wants the Spanish government to immediately recognize Gonzalez as the new president of Venezuela. The Spanish government saying, wait a minute, we're going to go in step with what the rest of the European Union is doing. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, Maria Corina Machado has proven to be a savvy political operative that knows what she's doing. She got everybody by surprise by being able to scan the tallies and show people that we won the election. So I'd be very surprised if she doesn't have another card under her vest to be able to play right. She has to know what she's doing, and I think the opposition has to be confident in her and stay solidified and coherent behind her. There's nothing else we can do as an opposition. It's either that or we go do the guerrilla in the mountains, and we're not going to do that. We're a pacific opposition, so we have to be behind her, and we have to hope that Edmundo does apply international pressure, and between the two things, we can coalesce a change in Venezuela.
How? Go ahead.
Please. And there is something also that is important, is that now it's clear that the regime, they unveil their faces. They are fraud, they made fraud, they don't care, they don't give the proof that they want. We have all the information, the whole world is seeing that he is not the president, and he doesn't care. He does the terrible arrestation, killing people. Well, now it's like that. Before, it was always a sort of democracy that was, you know, like we are a democracy. Now we know who we are. We have in front. There is a criminal state.
Let me ask you, Doris Argote Soto, how is this post-electoral crisis being covered where you are? What are ordinary Venezuelans seeing? How are they getting their news? Where are they talking about all of this?
Well, being a journalist in Venezuela right now, it's a very complicated job. Over the past 10 years, around 400 media outlets have been closed or censored, which means there's little to narrow window of information for Venezuelans. Venezuelans used to turn to social media to stay informed. They used to go to X or Instagram, but now that isn't even a possibility because Maduro censored X. Now they have to use VPNs, and so we journalists have to use VPNs in order to inform or deliver news, and so the public has to do as well. And there's another escalation of repression. Now people are being imprisoned even for posting anti-government content on social media. So this is a very complicated situation. We can say that journalism and the freedom of speech is under siege in Venezuela. So just the fact that I'm standing here talking to you, it's a very risky situation, but I think that that's the job we need to be doing. That's the only thing that I, as a citizen, can be doing for my country in the middle of this crisis.
And just to tell us about Maria Machado, what is her status at this point? She's been popping up at rallies and then disappearing. Is she wanted? Does she face court summons? I know she's under investigation, but what is her status at this point? Doris Argote Soto? All right, we seem to have lost the connection there with Caracas. The gremlins are at work. Vicente Olive, again, your thoughts on this?
Yes, I was just going to say that it's very possible that in a week or a month, I mean, these things, we can't see them coming. Revolutions and changes of regime are very difficult to predict. There's no playbook about it. Even historians don't know how to do this. So
yeah, but your novel, okay? Yes, you said it when, in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah. But
what's changed?
Well, a lot of things have changed in the intricate, like the formula that's under the cake that's being baked. But what I want to say is that maybe in a month or in a week, Maduro could be ousted, and then people would say, well, it's obvious he lost the election, he wasn't recognized internationally, he had no money, the economy was doing poorly, so of course he was ousted. But right now, at this precise moment, it's very difficult to tell. So we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I really think we have to wait till January the 10th, which is when the president-elect should take office, in this case, Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, and see what happens from there. Because right now, as the situation stands, with all of the Venezuelans against Maduro, the big, great majority, and you can see the militaries behind Pedrino Lopez, who is his clique of militaries that are holding the reins of power, they must be asking themselves that, if one of them turns, he could become the leader of Venezuela, the freedom fighter of Venezuela, and be applauded by everybody. So those guys may not be sleeping very well at night because something's going on under the covers.
You say no money?
There's not a lot of money. I mean, there's money left. It's a petrol company, it's a petrol country, and the money keeps on flowing in. And it's like, as any country, I mean, there are poorer countries in Venezuela that have had dictatorships where the governing clique has a lot of money and the people don't have any. But as far as like the normal people and the economic situation is very, very hard.
Yes, but anyway, that has to come from militaries, because
Probably.
they are the only one that makes that Maduro is in place. There is, there are so many things. Cuba is Russia, Turkey, many things. But really, in Venezuela, is the military that make the Maduro, he is still in power. There is, if we have one that maybe, I don't know, we don't know, as Vicente said.
And we're not calling for a push or nothing like that. We're just analyzing the way the government is structured. Because Venezuela, you have to understand, the way the government is structured is not like the traditional way. It's a system of clans that are attached to this sort of cartel. It is sort of a narco-state. So you have different clans. You can find one in my book, which is the clan of the terrorists, the Hezbollah. You have also the narco-traffickers, the people that are trafficking drugs. You have the business interests that are represented by Delcy, for example, that are also connected. And all these pieces move in and out of the government. Those are the changes that you see. So they're all vying to pull their way. So we don't really know what's going to happen, but things are moving a lot faster than it seems.
Stefano Soler Tamburini, is the military something you're paying attention to?
Yes, Venezuela, for example, is have an history monopolized for military regimes. The Venezuelan democracy was being short from 1952 and 1999. And in this moment, the difficult for opposition is try to abide a republic, a democratic republic, in a military context and in a militarized society, because most people in Venezuela using weapons for the resolution of problems, and in this moment we have a lack of rule of state in this country, and precisely because are different groups in Venezuela and in reality out of Venezuela that claim for military intervention in the country. The problem is, in first place, the international law, because the United Nations Charter talk about total security for each country.
I'm sorry, Stefano. It's again the sound quality is breaking up again. But different players within the military. Your book talks about, by the way, different outside players from Cuba, from Iran,
Russia, China.
From China.
So they're not going to let Maduro leave. They're going to make sure he stays.
Yeah, they have their interests too, and that's why they're ramping up the violence. Yeah.
All right.
Can you imagine?
Now, what is the incumbent saying? 70s glam rock band Wizard sang, "I wish it could be Christmas every day." Well, as of last week, that seems to be the direction Venezuela is taking.
Está llegando septiembre y dije, septiembre September is coming. And I said, it smells like Christmas. That's why this year, in homage to you, in gratitude to you, I'm going to decree the anticipation of Christmas for October 1st. Christmas starts on October 1st for everyone. Christmas is here with peace, happiness and security.
Llegó la Navidad con paz, felicidad y seguridad. Noris Argote Soto, what does that mean? Christmas starts on October 1st.
Well, this is not the first time Maduro declares Christmas beforehand. It's a common strategic that he's been using to distract people from whatever political problem happening in the country at the moment, and also as an excuse to deliver bonuses, money bonuses, which are really short. They don't cover basically anything, but they see it as a political instrument to control people. So this is not the first time he announces Christmas or another holiday beforehand, just that people focus their attention on that instead of the real issues happening domestically. And this occasion, I don't think this card is going to play out the desired outcome, because Venezuelans are 100% focused on this political crisis. Let's remember that there's around 7.7 million Venezuelans in exile or who has fled the country due to the political and humanitarian crisis in the country. And let's be clear, if this crisis continues to deepen, these numbers might increase to 1 or 2 million more. So that's the situation, and that's how I think that this whole announcement of the Christmas is going to play out.
Right. So, okay. So if I understand this correctly, Margarita Cadenas, it doesn't mean that Norris has to rush out and buy presents. It simply means that Christmas bonuses are going to be handed out early.
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
It's like buying the people, buying the country, trying to. What I think is now in Venezuela, the people is really willing for a change. It's really. It's not the same. The situation is completely different. Now...
But we can roll the tape again when you were on this very set back in 2019 and you know, panelists were saying exactly what you just said.
Yes, when I made my film, that was in 2017, and the situation is the same. But this time, we have really someone, that is Maria Corina Machado, that she's struggling for it. And she's untouchable. That's why, for instance, well, I think so, that she is, because if she get killed or imprisoned, I think that the problem in Venezuela could be very, very dangerous.
All right, Nora's mentioning there the spillover effect, and it's being felt much closer to home than Spain. Dateline, the Brazilian border town of Paracaima. We can show you images from the past few days. The UN's refugee agency has been assisting those fleeing their homeland. Brazil's president, Lula da Silva, has in the past offered a sympathetic ear to Maduro, but now there seems to be palpable tension. What with Venezuela last Saturday revoking permission for Brazil to represent Argentina's diplomatic interests in the country. 6 Venezuelan opposition figures currently holed up. They've been there for months in the Argentine embassy in Caracas. Brasilia standing firm and stating it would keep custody of the embassy until Buenos Aires names another country that's acceptable to Venezuela. There's a bit of war of communiques that we've seen the last couple of days. And again, these are countries, Vicente Olive, Colombia, Brazil, left-wing leaders. They've offered to mediate. they're not rushing to Nicolas Maduro's defense.
No, not this time in any case. And they're right to do so. Lula has insisted vehemently that he wants to see the tallies of the election because he knows he doesn't have them. Colombia is very, very worried about what my colleague was talking about with the migration because a lot of people go through Colombia. But it's good to keep these countries on our side so we can mediate. If everybody does what Chile did or what Argentina did, then we have nobody to talk to. So
are you surprised that Chile left-wing leader came out saying the election was a fraud?
I mean, when they added up the tallies of the election that they posted, it was 109%. I mean, yeah, I'm not surprised at all that Boric said it's not true. So yeah, I mean, the situation is complicated, but we have to find a way to really, I want to say negotiate because Maduro is a mastermind at negotiating and then going back on his accords as he did in the Barbados in 2023 when he said that he was going to let Maria Corina Machado run for office and he didn't. And he freed political prisoners like Rolando Carreño, who's a journalist, and then he's back in jail right now. So you can't really trust these people. Again, as I was saying, it's like negotiating with a Sinaloa cartel, in my opinion.
All right, the United States, which last week in Florida confiscated a private jet belonging to Venezuela's president, is reportedly planning targeted sanctions, including against key military officials that are responsible for what's called Operación Tuntun, Operation Knock Knock. That's been the post-electoral crackdown. The U.S. keen to court left-wing-led Latin American nations.
And we're working very closely together, both with regional organizations, but as well with the Dominican Republic, Brazil, Colombia, Mexico, other concerned countries, who know, again, that the future in Venezuela also affects them.
Norris Algote Soto, what do Venezuelans think when the United States weighs in?
Well, from the government side, of course, they keep the same rhetoric that the United States are supporting the far right sectors of the political statement in Venezuela. Of course, they said that this was a robbery, talking about the plane, of course. And, it's very much the same rhetoric as they've used since they won. There's not much surprise in there.
Not much surprise in there. Is the U.S., the threat of U.S. sanctions, does it work? Or is it the same conversation as we have with Iran or Russia?
Sorrowfully, we have to say that sanctions hasn't been at all effective in Venezuela. I mean, I had the opportunity to hear a debate between some politicians from the U.S. about whether the sanctions were an effective weapon or not to this kind of authoritarian regimes. And the cruel fact is that it isn't. What had helped is for them to, to hold on to this rhetoric that the United States are imperialist and that they are trying to ransack the countries like Venezuela, which is reaching assets in oil and all those kind of assets, like I said. So in terms of economy or in freedom, the sanctions hasn't been effective, or trying to lead to the goal, which was to get Maduro out of the power, but it hasn't been effective at all.
Early in the Biden administration, Vicente Olive, there was, at the time when Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, the U.S., there was a bit of a détente between the Biden administration and Nicolas Maduro's government. Can you apply carrot and stick when it's U.S.-Venezuela relations? How does it work?
You can, but you have to make sure you have the right carrot. And that's the thing. I mean, the United States, I trust them as far as I can throw them. And because they never work in our interest. The whole problem here is petrol. It's the geopolitical center and the crux of the situation. The Wall Street Journal published a piece in the 28th of July in which they showed that Chevron, the American petrol company, sent representatives to talk to the administration, to Biden administration, and told them that they needed to keep pumping petrol out of Venezuela to please keep the process running. Now, Chevron is 20% of Venezuelan oil exports. That's what Chevron does, and 31% of revenue for PDVSA. If the Americans want so much to help us, they could just cut that off. But if they do that, then you have the Russians, the Chinese, and to a minor extent, the Iranians and the Cubans that are going to jump in. So it's a very complicated geopolitical context that we're seeing here, and that's why it's different from Nicaragua, say, for example.
So, Estefano Soler Tamburini, what do you do if you're the Biden administration? What would a Trump administration do?
Yes, the difference between Biden and Trump administration is the alienation from Trump administration with a transition in Venezuela that could be realized also military, because Biden administration have a most prudent strategy. The strategy of diplomacy, of distension between past countries from the Ukraine war, and Trump is exactly the contrary, precisely because there are different Venezuelans in the United States that hope that in a Trump victory, in order to have a most aggressive strategy against Maduro government. The problem is lack of dialogue between politicians, because while petroleum and different products are being commercial and exchanged between both countries. And the risk is finally the isolation of Maduro, and Vicente was a present example of Nicaragua, the isolation of Maduro, of international community and of American continent. For example, the problem with Lula and Colombia, ex-allies of Maduro, is an example of a concrete strategy to isolate Venezuela from the other countries. And in my opinion, is the first preoccupation for United States.
Yeah, Margarita Cadenas, again, have we seen this movie before?
Well, you know, yesterday I was looking at some archives, and I saw the first page of Le Monde that says Maduro has really the international community is getting closer to him, and that was as 2019. And of course, but I believe this time is different, because for me, you know, there is something. You have Petro, you have Lula, you have López Obrador. At the beginning, they really support and try to do some mediation between. But now, for them, they don't want to be related to a leader that is socialist, but in reality is a dictatorship, a tyranny, a criminal. And, you know, they are starting to going backwards in the relation with Maduro. There is many elements that maybe something is going to happen. And my idea is that has to be inside in Venezuela and from the military forces.
Noris Argote Soto, the focus has been in this conversation on major players, neighboring states. We've talked about here Europe, the attitude to have towards the opposition, etc. What about outside of Caracas, in other cities in Venezuela? Is the situation the same as it was in 2019? Is this time different?
Well, the protest has been very, very different. I have to, to agree with my colleagues that this time around is a very different situation. This is not like 2019 or 2014 or 2017. This time, even the popular, the poorest barrios of the city came down to protest these elections, and so happened in the rest of the states. But let's remember that
just to remind our viewers, Norris, in previous standoffs, those barrios often were pro-Chavez, pro-Maduro.
Yes, they were often very, very pro-Maduro, pro-Chavez. And this is a very different situation. And I agree with my colleagues, but because this time the opposition did win the oppositions. On the other elections, opposition didn't win. And that's a reality, like it or not. The only election that the opposition actually won was the parliamentary elections in 2015. Other than that, always Chavismo won. But this time around, it was the poor people, the slums, who came down to protest the elections. They felt robbed of their popular will. But we have to be aware that the scenario, the picture in Caracas is very different from, the interior states of the country. The interior is really impoverished. The situation with the public services are 3 or 4 times worse than what we see in the capital. The capital is like the window show for Chavismo, for Maduro. They will always try to keep Caracas supplied in terms of power and in terms of food, basic goods. But the picture is not the same in the interior. And that's what has people frustrated and angered.
It's got people frustrated and angry. Vincent Olive, again, I come back to your novel. What's changed since those days? It was days when, if you were, your book's about low-ranking civil servants who have to dodge between the special interests.
Yes.
Has
the book takes place in 2012. It's gotten
and also
worse,
your book alludes to the fact that this plight had befallen citizens, whether it was a right-wing or left-wing government.
Absolutely.
In the past.
Yes. The power cuts, the shortages, inflation, that touches everybody. But I'd like to flip the question around. It's like, if Maduro doesn't leave, then what happens? Then the options that we're looking at is the only way he can stay in power is to enforce brutality, to be even worse on human rights, and he would become more isolated. So we'd be looking at a regime.
That's what they said about Nicaragua.
Yeah. Well, look at Nicaragua. Do you want to be Nicaragua? I mean, that doesn't seem like a good... It's a way that you can survive, of course, but it won't be sustainable in the long term. They have found ways to curtail the sanctions. For example, there's a journalist in Britain, Alexander Boyd, who showed this. They take the tankers out to sea, and then the Russian tankers come, and they put the Venezuelan petrol on the Russian tankers, and then the Russians leave because they can do whatever they want. So that's ways that they have to curtail the sanctions. But there is a limit to all of this. As our colleagues were saying, I really don't know if you have 80% of the country against you. You're throwing, 1,700 people in jail. You're torturing, you're committing human rights violations. The economy's not doing very well. There's hyperinflation. It's a very difficult regime to sustain, even if you have the militaries, even if you have the paramilitaries. And I think they will fall.
All right, there's a prediction. We shall see that inauguration slated for January. Vicente Olive, I want to thank you. I want to thank as well Margarita Cadenas, Norris Argote Soto for being with us from Caracas, Stefano Soler Tamburini in Modena, Italy. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.